Let's make a start. So it's always nice and easy, especially if you're watching this live on a Monday morning, then just still give yourself time to settle in properly, don't overdo things. And if you are new to this, just go again, nice and easy, enjoy the session. So just stand in for a moment and thinking about your basic posture to whatever sort of level of detail you are familiar with this. If you've done this for a while, you'll have more detail, obviously. Feet should be directly below your hips. Your weight slightly forwards and hips just settling back. So there's a slight, what I would describe as a curve in the knees. Don't try not to think of the knees bending, but it is quite strong in your legs, particularly the thigh muscle, because as you soften in your knees, you're going to find that obviously other parts of the body have to take over. So you have these more or less parallel lines from shoulders to hips to your feet. As you can have a little bit of sort of leeway in terms of the width of your step. And importantly, a strong feeling of your weight, your center of gravity, dropping. Or you could imagine your pelvis as though it was just hanging from your spine in the way that a bucket in a well might hang from its rope. And this posture begins to give us the basic, how can I put it, the basic feel of all the postures that we take. So it's always useful to stand for a few moments, get a sense of what's going on in your body, and recognize that this also means that you're just drawing your attention into your body. And this is also one of the qualities that we want to try and sustain through all the movements. Bring your attention to the center of your body. So this area roughly between your hips and your waist, and begin to just turn in that central part, almost like you can imagine you've got a little sort of spotlight in your navel and you're shining it around the room. You feel how that movement immediately begins to move your ribs, your shoulders, and of course your arms. Arms are very loose, hanging from your shoulders, and quite heavy as they hang from your shoulders. So they sort of flop around your body at this point. And again, this gives you part of the feeling that you will get in your arms with the various exercises, that they follow what happens in the rest of the body. This is quite tricky because obviously the most visible part of what we do is what happens in our arms. But when we move in the center of our body, you may also feel that there's a bit of movement in your legs. Ideally, for those of you with more experience, there wouldn't be, but you would still feel the connection. So the center part of our body is often described being like the hub of a wheel. If you think of a bicycle wheel with the spokes radiating out, then there's a couple of aspects of that that are quite useful to bear in mind. One is if you turn the hub of the wheel, which is what happens on a bike, of course, then everything else in the wheel moves, the spokes and so on and so forth, all move as one unit. So when we move from the center of our body, we're more likely to experience this sense of connection, this sense of our whole body engaged in the movements. Another aspect to the hub image is that if you think about the spokes of the wheel, the bit that's attached to the hub, well, it may only move a couple of millimeters, but at the other end of the spoke, there's going to be a lot more movement. And in the same way, we don't have to do big movements here. I'm doing this quite big so you can see what I'm doing, but it is actually throwing my posture out there. but the movement spreads or expands quite naturally. So we don't need to try too hard with our arms just to get a decent range of movement and a feeling of movement, of energy working through the body. So these are principles, these are qualities, I should say, really, rather than just principles, because they're things that feel that we want to try and bring into all of the movements. And it requires a change of perspective rather than, as we commonly do, viewing body from the top downwards. We sort of view it from the ground upwards, or maybe from the center outwards, if you prefer to think of it in that way. And that switch of attention is something that we keep reminding ourselves of in Tai Chi, because it's not our usual way of sort of following movement in the body. And it also means that in terms of the meditative aspect of the art, the drawing in of our attention to a quieter, spacious place, does actually have a physical location. It could be the center of the body, or from there down into the ground. But we become accustomed, and it becomes a habit of just drawing our attention in. When you turn from the center of your body, you may find that a nice steady rhythm begins to build. And this is another aspect of that feeling of connection in the body. And this is, I feel, an important aspect of Tai Chi, that we start to get a sense of wholeness, of unity, rather than that state of mind, which I'm sure we're all familiar with. You can't quite remember where you put your keys, and say to somebody, I'm all over the place today. Phrase sometimes used in modern computing is defragmentation. It's almost like we're defragmenting our mind, and this makes an important contribution to our general well-being, I think. So there's a sense of calmness, stillness, of spaciousness, however you care to label it. No one word is ever going to accurately describe this. But it exists within the movement itself. So a combination of stillness and movement, shall we say, characteristic very much of Tai Chi. As you're doing this, just note any areas that feel a bit stiff, a bit tight. The general approach, and the initial approach certainly, would be to try and get a sense of moving around those areas. We talk about finding the path of least resistance. If you imagine water running down a hill and encountering a rock or something like that, it would tend to flow around it. If you have more experience with these arts or similar arts, then you may well find that you're able to bring a bit more attention to that area, and maybe think about your posture and various other things. Some of you will know different ideas that I presented at times. But the path of least resistance, that sense of the flow, it would always be our first response. And this can be a very effective one. I'm going to change the arms slightly. I'm going to come forward so I don't bump into the wall behind me. Turn your hands palm out, raise them up to maybe just below shoulder height. Notice that my elbows are hanging down, and just notice the different feeling that you get when your arms are are slightly higher. What you can do, if you lower them down just a little bit to about level with your hips and then bring them up again, you may notice in your back, your sides, and the front of your upper body, slight changes in the feel of the movement, the patterning of the movement. So again, this brings us into a sort of more connected quality, that we become aware of a more connected quality within the body. Okay, and then just let your hands drop down. Now put one foot forwards, keeping the width of the stance. You can still see the background between my legs, about the same in length. And now just moving your weight a little bit front to back, being careful of your knees. So now we're bringing our legs more actively into the movement. There are various ways you can think of this, but one way you can think of it is that you're sort of pushing yourself forwards and backwards very gently. So again, this is a change in perspective that I feel is very important. We often lean forwards or backwards, or when we start to move, it can be a very good way of building up momentum and speed. That's what we're looking for, but it's really what we're trying to do here. But if you move from the ground, you get a greater stability. If you imagine if I had a sort of a pile of boxes in front of me, and I wanted to move them out of the way, I pushed on the top box, then maybe the whole pile would fall over. If I pushed on the bottom box, then the whole pile would move as one unit. So once again, we're looking for that sense of unity, shall we call it, within the body. And then on the other side. Again, a nice steady rhythm coming from the transfer of your weight. So these are valuable exercises, both in a very kind of like orthodox sense of being a physical warm-up. You can raise your heartbeat just a little bit, get blood circulating and so on. But also because they're quite good ways of just recognizing qualities of movement and understanding that we want to bring into the slower movements and just shake out. So for instance, that sense of rhythm is probably easier to recognize when we're going faster, but does actually exist in all the movements. So coming back to the hip width stance, and perhaps paying just a little bit more attention to this. There's some variation in where our feet might be. You could measure from the outside of your foot, giving a slightly narrower stance, or midline, or the inside of your foot, which is my preference. So there's a little bit of choice there, whatever's comfortable for you. You want to feel that your hips are supported and that your hips are able to support your shoulders. If you're standing like this, that's going to be much more difficult. This is not the only stance we use in Tai Chi, of course, but it's the one in the game where we establish the basic principles. And if I come a little bit closer, I'm going to exaggerate so that you can actually see this is like many movements in Tai Chi. This is very subtle. If I take my weight forwards into my feet, I actually now feel as though I'm falling forwards, and I'm bound to tense up. And what you want to try and do is to bring your weight to about the area of the balls of your feet, very slight angling forwards. Again, I'm still exaggerating, but then just allow gravity to pull your hips back down. So we come, again, exaggerating, we go from this to this. We call it sitting, and this is rooting down. In practice, it's just a a very slight movement at this stage. And again, getting the feeling of your pelvis hanging, if that's a useful image to you. Just feeling that your body's supported. Your legs are obviously supporting your body. You want your back to feel longer and broader than the front of your body, with a slight sense of the front of your body hanging. And finally, and increasingly, I think, we start to get a sense of how our skeleton, when it's brought into line, offers support for the rest of our body. It's also supported by the rest of our body, so it's a two-way process. We begin to get a sense that we don't need this tightness, this stiffness of this solar pitch. So from here, just let your hips drop back a little bit more and push on. Let gravity draw you down, draw your center of gravity down, and then you'll reach a point where your legs just quite naturally push you up. And at the top of the movement, gravity will take over and bring you down again. So there's the potential for that rhythm once again as your body expands and contracts. It can feel almost like a sort of wave or an energy coming up from the ground and then draining away. And the main focus of attention initially with this should be that sense of dropping down, just gradually letting your center of gravity drop down. We're told that our root, as we call it in Tai Chi, the exercise is called rooting down, should be 6 feet below the ground. So we're aiming to really get a feeling of our center of gravity going very deep. That really does help our stability. And as we can feel, it also means that we're more able to get a sense of that movement, that energy rising from the ground. Bring your hands around as though you're cradling a ball. And then as you push up, let the expansion in your body push your elbows out. Turn your hands over, let your hips drop down and press down. Body expanding and contracting. People with a bit more experience with this exercise, you may be aware of the more precise pattern within the body of a movement coming up through your back and then draining away through the front of your body. And it can be useful to gradually become more aware of those details. Partly and importantly, because they're ways in which we continue to engage our attention, our thoughts with the movement. And it's very easy for our thoughts to drift off, and particularly those of you with more experience, you know this exercise, we do it all the time. So you're standing there, not really doing the exercise, but just sort of waving your arms around and think about what you're going to do for the rest of the day and so on. Bring your attention back and just find again that sense of stillness, of spaciousness. Note how refreshing that can be. And then turn your hands palm out, or fingers out, palms are down towards the floor. Same action in your legs. This is the exercise, the wild goose. So we have this lovely image of the bird in flight that may convey quality, a feeling in the movement. Again, your body expanding, contracting. The third variant, again, using that movement in our hips, letting your hands drop all the way down, crossing in front of your belly and push up. Your elbows coming out, drawing your fingers around in a smooth circle. This is called parting the glutes. Gentle expansion all the way from your feet to your fingertips. I'll do one more of these. And as you finish this one, coming back down, bend your elbows, draw your fingers under, and go back to the first thumb, rooting down. And then turning your hands out and wild goose. And then dropping your hands down into parting the clouds. So just a very simple sequence. What happens in legs, hips is the same, but just see if you can start to get a sense of the transition from one movement to another and the effect that has on the feeling of movement within your upper body. You lose the sequence, it's not the end of the world. Obviously, we want to try and do this. But again, it helps with the focus of attention, but everybody has these lapses of memory, so it's very familiar. Let's do one more round. Keeping the movement up and down in the hips, so sinking down, and then as you push up this time, just expanding on one side, your elbow, drawing your fingers up, wind your arm around and pull down. This is called dragon plucks the stars from the sky. Push up on the other side, like you're just plucking a leaf from a tree very gently. Don't grip tightly. Notice any difference between one side and another? We quite often experience that. And try not to think of this as a stretch. You're extending upwards, but you'll notice at the end of the movement, my elbow's still a little bit bent. I want to feel as though I could have moved a little bit further. And again, this is a characteristic of almost all the movements that we do. Trying to just cultivate that sense of space within the body. One more time. Your hands drop down, and just for a few moments, go back to this swinging exercise. Let your shoulders loosen. You need to come forward a bit. Re-establish that rhythm. Feel the weight of your arms hanging from your shoulders. and then just shake out. So again, qualities that we find in the initial posture, we try and develop, we try and cultivate through the different movements. And that sense of spaciousness that I talked about helps us to get a feel for movement within the body. This is an internal art. And we can think in terms of the flow, we can think in terms of energy, however you care to think about it, momentum, but we want that to feel nice and smooth. Stretching is a good thing to do, it's just it doesn't come into this particular session. So stretching can obviously improve your range of movement, but try and think in terms of going to 80% for movement. Now, again, in this basic posture, the Wu Chi posture, allowing your hips to drop. So there's this constant feeling of pulling, a feeling in lower back, hips and buttocks, that they're slightly overhanging, almost like you're sitting on top of a fence. And when we do that, we also feel the push up. It's like if you drop down into water, you feel the water pushing you up. So again, it's very subtle, but we can get this sense of movement within the body. Bring your hands to your sides. And then around in front, and this time coming up a little bit higher, just a little bit above your head, and then back down to that central part of your body. Same thing again, except you let your elbows drop and push out to the sides. And so again, we have that nice steady rhythm expanding and contracting and expanding and contracting. Try not to pull your hands behind your body. It's quite a common habit. You see they're just a little bit in front here. And then I push out, and again a little bit in front of my shoulder, not right forwards, but just a little bit out there. And that helps to keep that feeling of our back, as I mentioned earlier, feeling longer, broader than the front of the body. And again, people with a bit more experience, maybe just aware of those changing patterns of movement, particularly in your back. Sort of massaging quality through your whole body, but specifically in your back. And this time, as you push out, turn a little bit in your hips without losing that feeling in your back. So try not to twist your back up and come back to it. And then on the other side, so again, turning in the center of our body to redirect our arms. And then finishing with a sideways push. It's called pushing in 4 directions. And it's very much about bringing our attention to the center. As I said earlier, this becomes a habitual response. We begin to associate that return in movement with a sense of realigning ourselves, recentering ourselves in both mind and body. That's a useful quality to take out of the session with you. Training body and mind, training the nervous system to return to a sense of calmness and stillness. One more round. Good. And then let your arms drop down. Be aware of the weight of your arms hanging from your shoulders. And one arm swings out and up, again, just a little above your head, and then straight down the middle of your body, the center line of your body in front of your nose, your sternum, your navel. And again, elbows quite bent. Gently pulling your fingers back as much as you can, almost like you're standing beneath sort of the arched doorway of an old church or an old building, and just sliding your hand around the arch. And then, if it's comfortable for you, you can add a turn again. If you find that this is pulling on your back or your hips, shoulders, then best to leave it for the moment. Take it very gently. Again, we don't want to twist our back up. And then change sides. Again, noting any difference between one side of your body and another. And once again, if it's comfortable for you, add in the turn. And if your arms are just swing. Give your legs a shake. So those last two movements show very much how, when we turn in the center of our body, the arms change direction. So we're told that the center sort of controls the arms in a sense, or shapes the arms. Another reason to focus into the center of our body. The next two exercises also use the center, but this time horizontal, vertically. So if I stand like this, my pelvis is more or less level. If I tilt my pelvis forwards, my hips will go back, my head and shoulders will go forwards. I also at the same time try and drop down. I'm exaggerating this so that you can see what I'm doing. And then to come up, I let gravity pull on my hips, and that slowly draws me up, trying not to stiffen up, to tighten up in my upper body. So it feels almost as though my head flows up. And I push up. So again, try this with me, pushing your hips back. Very careful with your knees and your back. Let your hips drop down and push up. Go as far as you're comfortable. Again, I'm trying to do this quite big so you can see what I'm doing. It doesn't have to be that big an exercise. Just be careful of your back and your knees. And this time, let your hands follow the movement. This is called rowing a boat in the middle of the lake. Nice and easy and gently. One more time. Now for the next exercise, leaving the arms out of this for the moment. Again, we're going to use the vertical movement, but first of all, turn. So turn in the center of your body, then push your hips back again. I'm exaggerating this. Then swing your hips across and turn back to the front. And again, let your hips drop down, pulled down by the foreground. And go in the other direction, turn in, hips push back, pelvis tilting, coming around, just allowing gravity to bring your body to the up. Turning, tilting, swinging around, and the arms again following that movement. Turn, and as you go back, this time hands are pushed forwards. We swing across, and we come back, and we have the exercise polishing the table. Both this and the previous movement illustrate how we come to a more upright stance with less strain, less tension, and maintaining our root, our stability. Do one more in each direction. And then just stand and shake out. So we can begin to see that in many different ways, this area, the central area of the body, the area that drops to the ground when we root down, that directs the movement, it's said to store the energy in that area as well. It's sometimes referred to as the lower Dan Qian. It's a good place to focus our attention, to get a sense of stillness, to get a sense of calmness. So overall, it's literally central to the practice. Now we're going to change the stance again to the one that we did before, going forwards and backwards. Imagine parallel lines going through your feet. Turn your left foot out to a comfortable angle and step along its line with your left foot, so you feel as though you're standing on the diagonal corners of the square. Once again, letting your hips drop, and once again, just beginning to transfer your weight a little bit from front to back. No more than 60% of your weight going into the front leg, no more than 70 going into the back. Now again, we can think of this as being a push from the legs. You could also imagine if you ever come across these big blue balls you get in gyms, imagine you're straddling one of those, so your center's sinking in to the ball, and you're just rolling the ball forwards and backwards. So again, we know that center part of our body becomes a significant element here. And particularly people with more experience, make sure you give yourself time to really settle in each leg, thinking about the alignment in the root of your body. Don't rush this. A very important exercise, very good exercise for our legs. Within the Tai Chi system, it's one of the crucial exercises. The saying goes in Tai Chi that the movement is rooted in the feet, with that dropping of our center of gravity and the alignment of our body with the pull of gravity, giving us the basic stability and that source of movement, that source of energy. We're told that the movement is transmitted through the legs, and we can see how that works here with the movement of our weight. is directed, shaped, focused through the center of the body. And you've done some exercises that show that very nicely. And finally, it's expressed in the arms. And this is what I was trying to say before about this change in perspective. When we see the arms moving, we learn how they move. We learn what moves them. Now, this time when you go into your back foot, just raise your front toes a little bit all your weight will go back. And you can turn the front foot out and go forwards. And when you settle in the front foot, push your back knee forwards and again, a bit more weight coming into the foot, trying to maintain this upright stance the whole time. Easy and gently. And then gradually more of your weight settling in each leg so that after a while, to see if you can bring a step in, push the foot out and back, put the ball of the foot down, lower your heel, go back, raise the toes. And this time, when you extend the leg, it's the heel that goes down first. We plant the feet. So you want to get a sense of just gently pushing the foot into the floor. Try not to stiffen up in soles of your feet or your toes. It's not a long step, so we don't need to lean. So trying to keep that alignment with the pull of gravity. And give your legs a shake. Then on the other side, so this time you're going to turn your right foot out. Take the square step with the left foot forwards, transferring your weight. Be very careful, of course, of knees, and ankles, and hips. You're looking for a fluid movement here, not a kind of strained movement. Try not to, particularly knees, I think, will often kind of tighten up. You want your weight to drop into your feet. Beginning to raise your toes and your heel. Again, people with more experience of this. I mentioned earlier feeling how the skeleton supports you and is supported by the body. Think of the skeleton as moving like swaying in a sense, like a plant in water might. There's a bit, the plant is supported by the water, but can also move through the water. So we start to get a feeling for this movement coming, not just from the ground, but from very deep within the body. And then stepping in. Those are the sort of things that we find, we get glimpses of when we practice Tai Chi. They come and they go. It can be very frustrating, but it's always nice when they are there. And as we feel them, I've said more experienced people, but if you're new to this, you may well be experiencing the same thing. And then either forwards or backwards, depending on where you got the space, take a few steps through. Just giving yourself a chance to reflect on simple process of walking, taking a step, planting your foot and so on. This is an opportunity once again to just focus our attention into something very simple, but also very important, of course. I'm going to change direction now. Very simple exercise, meditative exercise that actually can really help us with our physical movements, our stability, the flow of the energy within the body. But these exercises don't have to be complicated. Let me shake out. Now we're going to bring the arms back into these movements with a couple of movements. And again, or all of us, not just new people, remember, we're trying to generate the energy through our legs and express it through the rest of the body. It's not the rest of the body is involved in this. So have your right foot forwards this time. Mirror my movement. Start with your weight in your back leg. Push forwards and let that movement draw your arms through. And then back. This is called fisherman casting neck. If I exaggerate, I go forward. You see how my arms are held back and then they're released. And the same thing going back. So I'm standing in water. And the pressure of the water stops my arms from moving immediately. And it also encourages a sense of flow in the movement. Because we know that if you stiffen up and tighten up in water, it gets harder to move. So it's a very common image that we use for all the exercises. In this instance, I want you to try and use it to take the emphasis away from your arms. Try not to sort of lead with your arms. It's quite a difficult transition to make. We naturally gravitate towards paying more attention to our upper body, particularly our arms and our hands for obvious reasons. And the movement is rooted in the feet, transmitted through our legs, directed and shaped through the center of our body, expressed in our arms. Now going forwards, rest in the front leg, let your arms come through and then turn to your left. Let that swing your arms out, a little bit like the wild goose. Go back, letting your hands drop down, settle into your back foot. Turn towards the front leg and feel the body expanding once again. Going forwards, contracting in the upper body, expanding. This is the exercise wind blows the wings. You can see again how when we focus our attention into the center of the body and turn there, our arms are guided gently into the pattern. And then this time, when you go forward, settle in the front leg, push your back knee forward, and once again, bring the foot in. Plant the foot back. As you turn this time, raising the front toes and bring the foot in. Just aware of your posture as you do this. And if it's comfortable for you, then as you bring your arms through and your foot in, you may just want to raise your leg a little bit and back. Try and do this, keeping the alignment of your body over the supporting leg, hips dropping back. And only do it if you feel comfortable with this. You can leave the toes down and it will still be a very effective exercise. Oops, you can say I'm wobbling around there. You will get the odd wobble when you do this. Okay, shake up. Remember, if our pelvis can remain level, we're more likely to remain upright. But if I go do this and I raise the leg and I'm tilting the pelvis over, I'm going to lose that alignment. So let's try those two exercises with the other foot forwards. Left foot forwards again, hip width across your feet. Back foot is turned out. To begin with, front foot is pointing forwards, and it's fisherman casting neck. Wave-like flow through your body. From your back leg into your hips, through your back, into the front of your body, and down into the front leg. one part of your body is in motion, your whole body is part of that. Moving forwards and turning. Back, turn, wind blows the winds. Strong focus of attention in your own center. Maybe the image of the willow tree with its deep roots, strong supple wood will offer a quality again, is very, very highly regarded in Tai Chi. Again, just bringing your foot in, check your posture. Have you strained to bring the foot in? You throw in your pelvis, your hips out of line. Then maybe, if it's comfortable, raising the leg. This is a rotation in your hip joint, but you may find that it does cause you to sort of tilt and wobble around. Bring your attention to your center, hips dropping back. Try not to struggle with the pull of gravity. And then once again, either forwards or backwards, depending on where you've got room. I'm going to go forwards. Take a step. So this is dragonfly skims the water. For a moment, whether your foot is in the air or whether the toes are on the floor, this slight feeling of almost sort of hovering in the air. And now, once again, I'm going to change direction. This time, just bringing your feet out. Keep your legs a shake. Now, rub your hands together. And the pads of your finger gently tapping over your face. And over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. And one. The other side. The other part of your back. Around your hips. And your legs. Light on your belly. And into the upper part of your chest. Before we do our last exercise, just a reminder, if you're watching this live, it's that there are no classes on Thursday next week or next Monday. Today's the 21st, so no classes on the 28th of July. If you're watching on YouTube, that probably won't mean that much to you. And no classes on 24th either, the Thursday. So I'll be back here Thursday week, basically. The Tuesday classes are still going. But to finish, coming back to the parallel stance, once again, just aware of the qualities of this stance that are meaningful to you, particularly with new people, but more experienced as well. Try not to have this idea that you somehow fail when you lose those qualities. It's quite normal. And this last exercise is the one that actually encapsulates that idea. It's called Embrace Tiger, Return to the Mountain. And it's a good exercise to just recognize what brings us back. So letting your hips drop down, pushing up. This is the embracing the tiger bit. Bringing your arms around as though you're holding the ball against your chest. Feeling yourself drawn back to this more centered, more rooted posture. And settling down. And give yourself time and space just to reflect on what actually brings you back. For me, the image of the mountain encapsulates many of these qualities. It could be the physical effect of gravity on your body. You feel in your shoulders, your chest. But whatever it is, you know, what would be good to take away with you? To just have that idea that when you felt you needed to recenter, to rebalance a little bit, what would be most useful to you to recall from these exercises and from these sessions? Embrace tiger, return to the mountain. This time, letting your hands drop down again, hands quite heavy as they hang from your shoulders. Weight a little bit forwards, hips dropping back. And if it's comfortable for you to focus on your breathing, just take a couple of slow, gentle breaths. Or just be aware of your posture, your root, your center. Then just give your legs a little bit of a shake. Lovely. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching and joining in. As always, if you have any questions, do please drop me an email or get in touch somehow. Bye for now.